Okay, a question that I get from a ton of you is, where do I start if I want to start a podcast? And I love when answers are simpler than we expect them to be. So I want to tell you about a resource that's changed the game for us with our podcast, and that is Spotify for podcasters. If you want to start your own podcast, Spotify has a platform that makes it so easy. You upload your episodes and then Spotify actually distributes it everywhere onto all platforms and even helps you earn money so that it can be profitable for you and a blessing for you, your family, your people. Spotify for Podcasters lets you record and edit your podcast literally from your phone or your computer. So if you don't have a fancy setup, it's okay. You can immediately get started today. Then again, you distribute it to Spotify and everywhere else that podcasts are available. You can also do video podcasts, which sounds like a dream to me. And when you want to take conversations with your people to the next level, you can do Q&A and polls, all sorts of fun things. You can earn money with ads and podcast subscriptions, or you can just get started using what you've got for the good of others and the glory of God. Check out Spotify for Podcasters. I use it. I love it. I highly recommend it. Download the Spotify for Podcasters app. I have it on my phone, highly suggest, or go to spotify.com/podcasters to get started today.
Hey friends, you're listening to the Go and Tell Gals podcast, and I'm your host, Jess Connolly. On each episode, I'll have a guest who will give us a peek into what it looks like for her to run on mission in her everyday life. Our prayer is that it leaves you encouraged and spurred on to go and tell the good news right where you're at. In the fall of 2000, I was a 16-year-old girl in Charlotte, North Carolina, and I had been a believer in Jesus for about a year. And my family decided to begin going to a different church, and it was our very first Sunday. And this church was known for having a really large youth ministry. And so I was excited because this meant I might meet some new people, meet some new friends, but I was also a little scared. And I walked into the church's youth ministry room on a Sunday morning, and I saw this boy. And he was wearing a monochromatic baby blue outfit, a light blue long sleeve button down shirt with a light blue sweater vest. And I don't remember what kind of pants, probably some khaki something. And I thought, that boy is so cute. And yeah, that was 18 years ago. And I don't know how, but I somehow, about a year later, tricked that boy into liking me and dating me. And I've somehow tricked him into spending the rest of his life with me. I knew really early on that Nick Connolly was called to a life of mission. I knew really early on that I was called to a life of mission. And I had a lot of different ideas about what our life would look like. I couldn't have told you it would involve so many children. I definitely couldn't have told you it would involve living in Charleston. I don't even know that I knew it was going to be in the church, and I would have guaranteed that we wouldn't be running our own church or doing any of this together, but God's grace has been good to us, and we have lived through some really rough years and some really rough times, and we have done some really constructive fighting and arguing and storming and come out on the other end. And I know that we have got some incredible years ahead of us, and I know that we've got mountains to climb and battles to face that we couldn't even imagine. But I am so incredibly grateful to be standing by his side. And so it is my absolute joy to present this episode of the Go and Tell Gals podcast to you with my favorite human that has ever been born, Nick Connolly. Thanks for joining us.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Are you scared?
No, because I think if we were in a room with all of your listeners, then it'd be like, okay, the heat is on.
Right.
It's just you and me.
It's just you and me.
And all of our friends.
Sipping our coffee.
Sipping the coffee.
Yeah, we're happy. Okay, well, if you're listening to this episode of the Go and Tell Gals podcast, we're so thankful you're here. Hey, if we have some men listeners, now let's be honest, I've heard that we have some men listeners.
Hello.
In general. I mean,
I listen.
Yeah, you listen to every episode.
I'm not through every episode, but I have listened to most of them.
Okay, so we have a few men anyway. So I don't want you guys to feel insecure if you were already listening. It's okay. It's all right. But this is a special episode. We're putting it out the week of Thanksgiving and hoping that it's available for you guys. It will be available for you guys throughout the whole holiday season. So if you're traveling and riding with your significant other and you're like, oh, I love this podcast, but it's just for girls, here's an episode that is not just for girls. Also, Nick Connolly, my husband and my pastor, is our most requested guest on the podcast. So everyone's always asking for you to be on. I'm thankful you're here. And we're going to take it in 3 parts. So
let's do it.
This is an extra long episode. You can come back, you can listen, you can start, you can stop. But this first part is going to be a little bit of our story. I'm going to have you kind of share our story, meeting, not like, how you fell in love with me, because that's a long story.
It all started when I was born.
But about us and ministry and mission. And
oh, wow.
Yeah. What was that like? And I'll interject because that's what I do in life. Especially on the podcast.
So I feel very awkward in doing this because I feel like you're the storyteller of the fam. But I think when it comes to us in ministry together and separately, when we met in high school and even early on in college, we just had a heart for ministry. We had a heart for the church. We had a heart for his work, especially through the local church. And so whether it was us together or us separate, we always knew that this was kind of the trajectory for us in ministry. As we became one, we really have taken it in seasons. There were, seasons when you were working in anthropology and moving fastly up the anthro ladder. And there were seasons where I was plugging away in a church plant. But then there were seasons where you were with the kids and I was remodeling houses, but then we were serving the church. There's been seasons where we have done women's conferences, Influence Network, bringing it back. There's been seasons where you have written multiple books, you have been traveling and speaking, and then we have the local church here. And so I feel like we have done not every season, we've done a lot of seasons over time.
Yeah, we've done like you work, I work. We've done I work. We've done a lot of combos.
Oh yeah.
Tell people, because here's the thing. I've never interviewed myself on the podcast, but tell people a little bit what our day-to-day life looks like right now, and what your life looks like right now.
Our day-to-day life. I feel like we are still in a season where it's probably 50 to 75% normal rhythms, and then anywhere from 50 to another 25% of surprise.
I would say chaos. Pure chaos.
Chaos. That's a good word for it. Some people call it surprise. Some people call it chaos.
I like surprise. You're better. You're better
at that. I'm literally sitting here looking at our family calendar and I'm like, oh wow, that's a lot of dry erase goodness up there, because there's just a lot going on right now, and we're ending the year, and so that's a good thing. That means there's Proverbs 14:4 or 14:14 where there is much poop in the stable from your oxen. That's like a good thing, because that means God has blessed you with oxen. Yeah. And so right now there's a lot of poop in the stable.
Right.
Weekly we're balancing you being able to do what you do for All Good Things, you being able to do what you do for Go and Tell Gals, and then also you doing what you do for Bright City. And then for me right now, just even balancing Bright City in the midst of kind of being the only staff person that is working. We have so many people that pour their lives out, but at the end of the day, it's me and Deacon. And by Deacon, I don't mean a deacon that we have at the church. I mean Deacon, our dog.
Our dog.
So it is a season where it's just kind of like, all right, Lord, what do you want to do today? How do you want to do it? And okay, that was today. Now let's move to the next day. And there are some things that are on the calendar that's like, oh, okay, we're doing this. And last night we had a Monday night service, again, something that we're kicking off new as a church. It's a new rhythm. And so we're still trying to figure that out and work through it.
And this is, let's say, honest words, this is a tough season.
Tough season. We are coming out of a tough season.
Yeah.
In Jesus' name.
Yeah, this has been a really hard one for the church and for you, and you've really persevered well. You have.
I think I was listening to Erwin McManus one time, and if you don't listen to Erwin, there's some good Erwin stuff out there. But Erwin was talking about how people approach him and they're like, oh man, how do you do this and how do you do that? And did you ever see that you would be this guy that's leading into the future of the church? And would you ever be this person that was speaking? Did you ever know that you would travel and speak? And I mean, he's preaching in several different languages and he's going all over the world. And he like just all of a sudden just started dying laughing. And he was like, man, there is nothing compelling about what I'm doing. I just happen to be the last person standing. Yeah. Like I just happen to be the person that didn't give up. I just happen to be the person that just didn't say no. And so I think a lot of what I'm learning in ministry is like, man, if you just keep going, that is 99% of the battle, because if you keep going, that means Christ in you keeps going. If you keep going, that means the Holy Spirit is still able to work in and through you in whatever season he has for you. And so if it is a hard season, which has been a hard season for us, it's like, man, we have to keep going. We have to keep pushing forward because the one who calls us is faithful, right, and he will do it. Which I think is 1 Thessalonians 5:24 for anyone keeping score. Like it's him doing the work. And if Jesus hasn't come back yet, then he's not done with us. And so I feel like, especially when it comes to calling, it's not mine to quit. Like the calling is always his. It's always like he gave it to me, and because he gave it to me and it's not mine, I can't quit the calling that he gave me. And so it feels almost like a stewardship issue. And so I know that for this season, it has looked a little more where we have been tired and we have been discouraged and we feel a little more beaten down, feel like we're pushing a square box up a hill. Like it feels like that. Actually, we did that today with our trainer. We know what
pushing square boxes is like.
Oh, that was horrible.
We just did that an hour ago.
So bad. So bad. And so it feels a little bit like that. But the beautiful thing in that is sometimes the task is simply just to not quit.
Yeah. Okay, a few things I want to capture from that. Number one, a few months ago, you looked at me and you said, I just want to be the guy that didn't quit. And I actually ended up posting about it on Instagram. I don't know if you remember that. And I said back to you, then I just want to be the girl standing beside the guy that didn't quit. But that sounds pretty on Instagram. And what maybe...
So flowery.
It sounds so flowery. What maybe you can't infer if you don't hear our voices, which now you get to, is that means we considered quitting.
Oh, yeah.
It's on the table.
Yeah. When we first started the church, we were doing a monthly ramp up. And I feel like at the time, I mean, this was 5 years ago. And I feel like at the time, I didn't know too many people that were meeting monthly to go into weekly.
Yeah.
And now I think it is a common thing where you're kind of having these pre-launch parties or whatever you want to call them. And when we were meeting monthly, part of the reason we were meeting monthly was not because we wanted to build momentum or not because we were like, oh my gosh, if you launch and then you leave them wanting more, they'll want to come back. It wasn't anything like that. It was because we literally did not have the pieces in play to do the very thing that we knew God had called us to do. But we knew that we were step by step with him in a manna season, and we didn't have it today, but we knew we would have it tomorrow. But he did give us whatever we needed for today. And I remember, I think it was a Saturday, we're laying in bed, just had woken up.
Yeah.
And
this is officially before the church has launched every week.
I wanted to quit before we started, is essentially what I'm saying.
Yeah.
We just did not have a worship leader, and I was just feeling oh man, this feels like the end of the world. And the truth is it wasn't the end of the world, but it was just in that moment, it was like, man, what are we doing? We don't even have what we need to do the very thing that God's called us to do. And I don't know if you remember this, but we actually ended up, instead of having worship through music, we responded.
Do I remember?
Sometimes you just want to block things out.
I really appreciate that you think I would have forgotten that.
That is true. You don't forget anything.
Yeah.
But that's a whole other podcast. But we ended up, I would preach and we would respond in community, and we would literally talk about what was said, and then we would talk about how we were going to put it in practice.
Yeah.
And looking back, it was not a big deal at all. But for us, it was like, oh man, what are we doing? And I just remember that Saturday just wanting to quit. And if you ever talk to some of our early Bright City, when it was actually called Gospel Community people, out of nowhere they'll start talking about the old days, and they're like, oh man, do you remember when we responded in community and we did that thing where you preached, and man, we just got to talk about what was happening and we got to pray? Man, those were some of the best days ever.
They loved it.
And then you're dying on the inside laughing, because it wasn't out of a like, hey, this would be a good idea. It was out of the like, hey, we
don't
have
have a worship leader.
We have no other ideas.
Yeah. We tried so hard to pitch it as like, isn't this cool?
I don't know if there was any pitching.
I think I tried. I tried. You know, I'm a marketing girl, so
I wear everything on my face.
Yeah, but it's true. There were so many people who loved that season in our church and thought it was so beautiful, and we were like, oh, it's really weird. We didn't have worship. Okay, I want to capture that. So I mean, like,
well, capturing that is that I tried to quit before we started.
You did. That was, I would say, we have been leading the church for 5 years.
Yeah.
I would say there have been 3 really bad days, and that was the first really bad day.
Yeah.
Where I remember you said, like, can we quit? I think you asked me, like, can we not do it? And I, for whatever reason, thankfully, here's God's grace, right? Maybe whether you're in church ministry or not, if you guys are listening to this and you're a married couple, or if you one day want to get married, what is often really helpful is that often the Lord will arrange it so that, you know, one of us will be weak when the other one is really strong. And I actually tend to be, in general, the weaker human.
Oh, no way. No way.
When it comes to quitting, I consider quitting a lot. I mean, I consider quitting everything. This is true. This is not a joke. Like, really, truly. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I don't want to quit motherhood. Like, I don't want to quit marriage. I very often consider quitting everything that I start, just because when it gets hard, that's my personality. I think like, and done. But by God's grace, I would say your 3 darkest days that I can actually remember now, like with a lot of clarity. Mm-hmm. I feel like your 3 darkest days, the Lord has let something rise up in me where I said, like, you are not quitting.
Yeah, no, that's only God's grace.
Yeah. But I say all that to say, like, quitting is on the table, not meaning like it feels like an option for us, because it really doesn't. Like, we're not going to quit the church.
No.
But when something is hard and it's costing you so much, I think there are so many people who really doubt their calling because quitting feels like an option. And so I feel like it's so vulnerable and helpful for you to come and say, like, do I want to quit? Yes. Am I going to? No.
Oh, yeah.
Because people just act like there's this like fearless, tenacious sense that once you're called to something. Yeah. But faith is actually very often like going scared, going broken.
Oh, man. Yeah.
So the most recent book I wrote, I just turned in the manuscript, and I haven't been able to share the name of that book yet, but I'll be sharing that soon. But I was writing it during this really rough season for us, and you were really helpful for me in that, and I'm so grateful. But it ended up being the message I most needed to hear myself, and that was really helpful. But near the end of the book, I don't know if you remember this, I was kind of feeling like lost on words, and came to you and just asked for the permission to be really honest about where we were at. Mm-hmm. And what I felt like I needed to say in the book was, there's a lot about writing a book and leading a podcast and even doing what I do, traveling to go teach, that feels very much like this stage season of life. Like, I'm on the stage, isn't it shiny? I must have made it somehow. And really, you and I are in quite a like shadow season of life. Like, if you imagine a concert, you know, there's the stage where it's like you're performing, you're excelling, you're doing what you were made to do. And then there's like the backstage where like you're preparing and you're learning and you're resting up and you're getting what you need to perform. And I said in the book, I feel like you and I are kind of more like huddled in the shadows of the backstage.
We're in the corner.
We're like just kind of huddled down, like maybe we just got done vomiting. And we're like slurping coffee. But truly, God has been very mighty in the shadows. And so anyhow, it's interesting. I just got edits back from that book. My editor has been reading it, and I just got to the part where I really started to say, like, hey, we're in the shadow season of our life, and here's what it looks like, and I want to just put some light on that. And she actually said, like, are you sure you want to be so honest? Because it may be really discouraging for some of your church leaders to know that you considered quitting.
Oh my gosh, no.
Yeah. So I mean, thankfully we have really good leaders who are not freaked out when we say that. And also I feel like, right, it helps that like when you're sitting with us, it's different when you're reading a book, but when you're sitting with us, you can see the tenacity in our eyes. You know, like we're not going anywhere. This is our city. Like what drives us is our love for the people of our city. And so we're not going to quit on them. We're not, right, exactly. Like you said, the calling is not ours to quit. But I just think it really helps to bring that into the light. And so
I think Instagram does like, I mean, I love Instagram, and Instagram is amazing, and I love the life that it brings. It's such a lovely, beautiful, inspiring platform. But I think a lot of times it gives us the impression that everyone's doing great, and when you're in your sweet spot, things are really easy, and things are really beautiful, and things are really right, and it all is working together. And I'm sure that one day there will be seasons where things are clicking here and there, but I really do feel like if leaders are really honest, if people are really honest, quitting is never on the table, but it's always the thing that we have to fight through, because it is one of the things where, I mean, that's the defining line. Like some of us will sit in church every week and we hear like, oh my gosh, like here's the option, here's the fork in the road. It's either flesh or his power. And I think that that's the deal is you're literally trucking through life, and you can wake up one day and you can say, all right, I'm going to walk in the flesh and I'm going to quit, or I'm going to walk in his power and I'm going to want to quit, but I'm going to see his power rise up in me and do great things in and through me. And I think that that is the real honest thing. And even going back to your book and like what you said about that, Craig Rochelle, his podcast is a leadership podcast, and I think it is for like church and leaders. But one of the things he says at the end of every podcast is, I think people would rather follow a leader who's always real than a leader who's always right. And I just think that that is where we have to get in the church, is like, man, we need to be people who are real. And that is where our leadership comes from. And that's where our serving comes from. And that doesn't mean that we get to like be negative all the time. And it doesn't mean that we get to sit in ashes and wallow like an Old Testament prophet or something.
Right.
But it does mean that we get to say real things. And I love that the Bible says real things, and it's always accompanied with some sort of but. Like, this is how I feel, but this is what I know. This is what I am doing, but this is what I know that he's going to do. And I just think we have to live life in such a way. I was reading, I think it was Psalm 121 this morning, and David was like talking about him looking over to the mountains. And he's like, I look to the mountains, and then he asked the question, like, where is my help going to come from? And I think as a leader, I was reading that, and you sometimes have your eyes on the horizon. You're like, okay, we've got this group of people, and we've got people who are doing an amazing job, and they're pouring their lives out. Where is like more help going to come from? Because I really feel for them and want more for them. And so you're looking out to the horizon. You're like, all right, Lord, where is the help coming from? Where is the help coming from? And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, David says, my help comes from the Lord. And so it's just this idea that the help doesn't come from the mountains. It doesn't come from over the mountains. It comes from the one who made the mountains. And I just think that that is how we have to lead and function in life, is like, man, we are going to feel and say real things, but it's always followed by the right thing. And that's truth. And that's what God wants to say to us in those moments. Like, hey, this is a real feeling that you have, but do you know what's right? Do you know what's true? Do you know what's noble? Do you know what's the real thing that's going to proceed out of this? And I think we just have to be able to lead from that place.
Okay, that's so good. I'm going to end this one section with like a spitfire. Let's see if you and I can give some really quick tips of how we encouraged each other on those incredibly dark days. I mean, we've had a rough year, but in general, we've had really rough years before that. We've walked through a miscarriage and kids in the hospital and poverty. And so, like, quick tips. How did you love me well? Or maybe we should flip it. Yeah. Maybe I should just say how you loved me well in those times. And I would really love to hear if I have ever loved you well.
We're going to save that for later. Just kidding.
I'll go first.
Go for
I'll
it.
give you a minute to think. Anytime you have pointed me back to God's word has helped. And I would say exactly what you just said. When you've let me feel, when you've not tried to convince me not to feel, I don't think it's ever helpful when we use God's word as a weapon to like subdue someone's feelings.
Or try to fix them.
Or try to fix them. But when you've like honored like that stinks. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry you feel that way.
Mm-hmm.
And then have given me God's word. This is incredibly practical and maybe very intimate. But like literally there have been times in our marriage, and again on like darkest days where I feel like you have like put me to bed like praying for me. Like just kind of tucked me in and I do ask you to tuck me in.
Yeah.
Most nights.
Yeah.
You don't.
Tucker. I have like a sheet. That's how I Homegirl's got like 5 blankets.
I do. I use all the blankets and he uses one sheet, but I do ask that you would like place them nicely on me before you fall asleep. You don't.
You put pillows on you?
I do. I put pillows physically on top of me to sleep. And that has really helped. There have been many seasons in our life where you've just sent me away. Mm-hmm. Just said like, go to Starbucks for 2 hours. I don't care what you do. I don't care. I don't care if you write. I don't care if you pray. I don't care if you cry. Just get out of here.
Not that this was like my doing, like, oh my gosh, you get to go do this, but like when you were in that little last stretch of the book, you went to Target and bought like a blanket. And
100%. Yeah.
There was like a few little things like that kind of got you over to the
next stop. Like, right, can I go to Target and just spend like an undisclosed amount of money? It ended up being like $50.
4 hours later. Just kidding.
It wasn't like $300. No. It was like $50. But I was like, I just need a blanket and like a new mug, something to get me through the end of this book.
That was a new mug. I remember that,
I would say not questioning my desire to go to counseling has been a huge win, and just telling me like, we'll figure it out. We'll figure out the finances. You've done that in multiple seasons in our life, and that's really helped a ton.
It's my turn.
Yeah, go ahead.
I feel like you're always, and I mean, this is not a shocker, but you always lead with words. And I am not a words person, but I think just in the season of ministry that I'm in now, is like there are very few words. Like I'm the one that gives the words for other people. Yeah. And that's my job. And so there's very few times where people have given me words. Yeah. And people do. It's not like nobody's encouraging me and my life's horrible, but I just think the words are few coming this way and the words are many coming from my way. And I know that's like totally a part of leadership, but one of the functions is the church is that the words flow both ways. And so I feel like you do give good and timely words of encouragement. And then I think the other big one that has just been amazingly helpful is like in this season you have just owned the date night aspect. In a perfect world, I would love to be the one that's like scheduling the babysitters and like, okay, what are we doing, how are we doing it, where are we going, what are we going to do? And it has been like the piecing of you finding someone, or if I can find someone, or if we're going here or we're going and doing that. And I feel like there has just been like a good grace in that from you for us. And it doesn't mean that that's how it needs to be every time. Yeah. But in this season, it's like, man, the win is not the like perfectly planned date night, but the win is like, did we get out of the house for a little bit together and come back together, which is always key.
Until we come home together.
Where's mom? I don't know.
She left. I want to pause there, and I'm not to like toot my own horn at all in the slightest, but I want to say what I don't think a lot of women would say is that I like to be pursued. And that is a thing for me. Yeah. I mean, and I feel like in this season, there have been times when I've been like, I really wish you would plan the date night. And then I realized like, he does not have it in him. He like actually doesn't. And God's graced me with a mind to think 3 steps ahead on the calendar. Like I'm always thinking about the calendar. Gosh, yeah. And so I know that we only have this one night or that kind of thing. And so I feel like it has been a choice to say like, I know that you pursue me, and I know that this is not a season where you can pursue me by planning the perfect date. And so sometimes husbands, wives, we really genuinely have to let each other off the hook. But to turn that back around on you, I wanted to say one more thing that has really blessed me that nobody knows about you is that in this really rough season for the church, you have really dug into our family. And I've seen you like choose to not be discouraged And you've said it all the time. One time you texted me and I said, hey babe, I'm so sorry I can't get the kids from school today. And it was a really rough day for you, I remember. And you said, I want you to know in this hard season, like one huge gift has been that I've had more time to spend with you guys. And so where you could see yourself as like lonely or not having a staff, or you've just seen it as like a great time to pour into us.
Oh my gosh.
And in effect, our family has experienced revival.
Yeah. I mean, I think our kids are not very old. Like, I know people in our lives that have kids who are older and have kids who have moved on, but I just feel like every day I'm reminded with how quickly this time is passing by. And just like, oh man, like we just have a vapor left with Elias. We have a vapor left with Glory. We have a vapor left with all of them. And I don't want them to leave our house hating the church. Some of the most beautiful movements that I respect are movements, big, small, whatever it looks like, where the kids are still hanging out around church. Maybe they don't go to the church that their parents go to, or maybe they're not involved in it, but man, they just love being refreshed by it. They love coming back to it, no matter what it looks like, no matter how it looks. And so I think, of course, like I want the relationship to be good with us, but man, I want them to love Jesus and love his church. And so part of that looks like being able to sacrifice the things that I think I would want to do for the sake of progress in the church, and just knowing that, man, progress now looks like being present with them. And I know that like we all want that, like we all want those things in our kids' life, but I just feel like even more now, so I guess just more than ever, like just feeling the urgency to have that with them, because I will always be able to do ministry, Lord willing. Like, man, I just think about when we're empty nesters, not that I want to get there, but man, I better be busting it as an empty nester, like pouring out for his kingdom, because the kids have moved on. Whereas right now, the ministry, it is our kids. And I just want to live in what he's called us to in this season.
Yeah, so good. All right, y'all join us back in a few minutes for, well, really, in like a half a minute, for the next section of the podcast. Okay, friends, you should 110% know that Nick and I are avid coffee drinkers, and during this episode you may even hear us sipping on coffee. And in our house we have recently made the switch to West Rock coffee. Here's why. West Rock is a brand that's changing lives by providing coffee that you can be proud of, that you can feel grateful to have in your home. Their focus is to be a catalyst for real change in the lives of farmers and their families by paying a fair price for the coffee in their blends and offering farmers training to enhance the quality and the quantity of their crops. I don't know about you, but that sounds incredible. Give a farmer dignity and also teach them how to make more coffee is what I am here for. I love the coffee. I want the coffee, but I want to change the world when I buy the coffee. We believe that you are a world changer and your coffee should match. So when you purchase from West Rock, not only are you making a difference in the life of a farmer, but you're also getting really incredible coffee that I would like to tell you I stand beside, and I'm a coffee critic. Here's the deal. You can get it so many different places. You can get it at Kroger or Buy Low if either of those places are close to you, or at my absolute favorite place, on Amazon.com. You can prime that coffee straight to you and drink it and change the world with your coffee. Welcome back. We're glad to have you.
So good to be here.
The middle section of this podcast is I'm not even going to say controversial. You know what word I'm going to say? Can you guess off the top of your head?
No, keep going.
Spicy. It's going to be a little spicy. In the middle, these are a lot of the questions I've gotten for Nick, specifically for you to handle. And
Okay.
We're going to keep it quick and spicy. But if you are not in ministry, if you are not married, if you are married to a man who runs a mission, some of this is going to be for you. These are some of the more like spicy questions I've gotten for you.
Okay.
So hold on to your hat.
I don't like spicy food, but I can deal with spicy questions.
Okay. Women in ministry.
Yes.
It's been a thing for us.
A spicy thing.
I mean, this is what I've said, right? So you've listened to a lot of the podcast episodes. You know what I believe that Jesus said to Mary is go and tell.
Yeah.
Go and tell what you've seen me do. So I know that we do not feel any capacity or authority to like prescribe what we think is right for women in ministry in any church or in any culture. But we have lived in a lot of different cultures and a lot of different churches. And you and I have ascribed to many different ideologies where it pertains to women in ministry. And right now, I would say you and I do not fall under any category, correct?
Yeah, which I think is a good thing.
A lot of times people ask me if we're egalitarian or complementarian. If you do not know what those words are, you're
They're actually the name of vitamins. No, I'm just
kidding. If you don't know what those words are, don't stress. If you do know what those words are and they're very important to you, this may stress you out.
Yeah, but it shouldn't, because I think when you gather with your family on Thanksgiving, you know that everyone's coming from different backgrounds and different places, but the beauty in it is that we're all gathered around something greater than ourselves. And I think that's part of the beauty, or should be the beauty of the church, is that we're willing and able to gather around something greater than ourselves and greater than what we think and greater than whether we're right or wrong.
Yeah.
So do I just go?
Just where's your like stance right now? Where do you live?
My stance is on my knees. So we have been a part of a lot of different amazing churches, and we actually were a part of, honestly, what kind of ripped the Band-Aid off was we were a part of a somewhat toxic environment. And I don't use that word lightly, because I believe that the power of life and death is in the tongue. And actually the environment that we were a part of is somewhat dead. So I don't think that rests on my tongue, but just rests on what happened. But
the church died.
It just disintegrated.
Yeah.
And
because of the toxicity.
Oh yeah, it was just it imploded on itself. And I think so. When I say that, I'm not saying that everyone listening right now, you get to like now look inward and say, oh my gosh, me too, my environment is really toxic. So I don't want to say that lightly. But for women in ministry, I think we really just entered into a journey of what that looks like for us, not as a means of policy. I just feel so hesitant to put policy on people, because I do believe that people aren't policy and we can't be governed by policy. We are image bearers, and we are walking and trying to follow Jesus the best that we can. And when you try to put policy around that, man, it just did not go well for the religious leaders who were around Jesus at the time. And so I feel just super hesitant to put any kind of policy around things. But when you look at God's word, specifically at a place like Luke 8:1-3, it's a place where Jesus and Luke, by the power of the Holy Spirit, they're just pausing in that moment and just letting people know that women had a place at the table when it came to the work and ministry of Jesus. And I think what did it for me is I was really wrestling through what Paul was saying in his letters and what Jesus had said. And I don't think that they were at odds. And all of a sudden one day I just got fed up, and I was like, man, I just need to go back to the Great Commission. I need to go back to what Jesus said. And in that place in Matthew 28 and other places in Scripture, that word teach is the same word that Paul uses when he's talking in his Timothy letters. And there's some more cultural things around what Paul said in his letters. And I really don't want to talk about it because I feel like that's when it just gets crazy. But at the core of who Jesus is and what he's called us to do, he's called us to be people who go and tell. He's called us to be people who go and share. And so for everyone listening, that just looks so different. It looks like somebody serving in a hospital. It looks like somebody serving with their children. It looks like someone maybe having a job in a nonprofit. It looks like maybe somebody going to work and working with, just people who are going through it. And I think whatever it looks like, wherever God's called us, I don't care who you are, I don't care what your gender is we are essentially go and tell people. And that's the call that God's put on our life, is to be people who go and tell the work that Jesus has done in our hearts and the work that Jesus wants to do in other people's hearts. And so when you think about the mission of Jesus being simply that, it really cuts through all the politics and the red tape that people have sometimes. I don't know. I want Bright City to be a place where you can go and tell, where, Jolie, who teaches as well, like she can go and tell. She is such a gifted teacher. I just feel like she runs circles around my teaching. I want it to be a place where Gloria, our daughter, can like grow up and steward the gifts that God's given her. And so that to us, that is such an important environment, is to have the heart of the Father as it pertains to women and men. We just want it to be a place where both thrive.
Okay, I'm going to ask some spitfire questions.
Let's do it.
That may not be related.
Okay.
What would you say to a woman whose husband is not running on mission, or who does not value that?
Who does not value that call
on his own life, even?
Oh, on his own life. Wow. Well, a few things. I feel like the 1 Peter 3, where it's like, man, you're going to live in such a way where one day the husband will look back and be able to just see what God was doing. And then number 2, like, man, God's the only one that can change a heart. And our job is to pray into that. And our job is to live in such a way where lives and hearts around us want to actually change. But only God's the one that can change the heart. And I hope that doesn't leave you in a hopeless place. It should leave you in a hopeful place, that number 1, the heavy lifting is off of you. And number 2, that, man, when he does it, it's going to be beautiful. It's going to be lasting. And it's going to be something that nobody can control, because when God really lights that fire, I mean, you can't put it out.
I love the Message version of that passage. It says, the same goes for you wives, be good wives to your husbands, responsive to their needs. There are husbands who, indifferent as they are to any words about God, will be captivated by your life of holy beauty. So the only thing I would add there is that is a tense line to walk to.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
And we hold that with you, to just say like that there's a lot of tension there. But we talked about this even, we didn't talk about this at our church on Sunday. I actually talked about this at a conference I was at last week, that one thing I had to learn, and thankfully for all of our marriage, I have been married to someone who does care about mission and who does pursue God. But if for some reason you, God forbid, decided you did not want to pursue mission or pursue the heart of God, that I would not believe that it would be submission for me to stop doing those things.
You would keep doing and keep serving.
Being obedient to God is king.
I think even like that was a context of marriage, but for all women everywhere, golly, like y'all are married to him first and foremost. And so whatever happens after that is only to prepare us and make us more ready for that final moment of marriage with him. And so this is not about us in marriage. It's about you and him, and it's about me and him. And so that's the final picture. And I think sometimes we put marriage on this pedestal, and like, oh man, people who are married have a special place in the church and have a special place in ministry and have a special place in God's heart. And that is the furthest from the truth. Marriage is only meant to be one of the many tools that he uses to prep us to stand before him one day. And so I think no matter what it looks like, whether the context is marriage or the context is, man, someone in my marriage doesn't want me to be on mission, or the context is I'm not married, what does it look like for me to be on mission? Can I do that? It all goes back to you are serving and living for one marriage, and that's Christ. And that's the picture that we need, and that's where we're heading. And so your final destination is not our marriage. Your final destination is your marriage with him. And so I think it's just so important to keep that in perspective. And it doesn't mean that you live rude and reckless now. It just means that you live humbly doing what he's asked you to do, because that's more important than this,
Okay. One more question. What's been hard for you? Really genuinely, what's been hard for you about being married to a woman in ministry or on mission? People asked a lot of questions about, like, is it hard for you? Is it hard for you when I travel? Is it hard for you that I write books? Is it hard for you that I do church stuff too, and that I don't just like stay with the kids all the time? So speak into that a little bit.
No, I don't think there's any hard, heavy things. I think the hard things lie in the logistics. I think for me, the constant tension for me at least is, all right, where do I serve so you can, and where do I serve in what God's called me to? And so like honest answers are like, oh man, like is today a day where I need to keep working up until 5 or 6, or is today a day where I need to be with the kids so you can keep going? Like when it came to like some of the book writing days, it's like today a day where I need to get church stuff done, or is it today a day where I need to just be with our kids so that you can get your stuff done? And I think it's just a constant give and take in what that means. But I think the beauty of that is I'm still fulfilling my call, because in Ephesians 5, my call is to serve. In the Gospels, my call is to serve. And so whether I'm serving the kids or whether I'm serving you, I'm still fulfilling my calling. My call is to serve. My call is not to come and be served, but to serve. And I think when you keep that in mind, it really keeps everything in perspective. And the other thing I would say is just no matter what's happening in your life or my life or any of our lives, like Jesus is the one that's building that. And so if I'm with the kids, the beauty is that he's still building the church.
That's right.
If you're with the kids, the beauty is he's still building Go and Tell Gals are all good things. Like he's still at work even when we're not. I don't know if that answers your question as much as just like, hey, here's the things that run through my mind when we're walking through seasons like that is whether it's with the kids or with the church, my call is to serve. And no matter what I'm doing, when I do it, he's building the church, not me.
And neither of us esteem either of those things more. Like we don't, you know what I'm saying? We really genuinely
there are
don't.
many days where I'd rather be with our kids than be in the church.
100%. For sure.
And there's days where I'd rather be with the church stuff and our kids are going crazy.
Yeah. I was at a conference this past weekend teaching, and it was an incredible conference, and I was so grateful, and God was moving. And right before I went on stage on Friday night, I looked at the pastor and said, my kids are going out to pizza right now. I'd really rather be with them. Like, I love you and I love God. And I love that God's going to move here in this church tonight. And I'd really rather be eating pizza with my kids. And he did. And he did. And he moved in both places. Yeah. You know, so yeah, it helps that we really don't esteem one or the other. All right, I've got 2 pastor wives question to end off this section with. Number 1, your friend Kyle Carroll, hey Kyle, asked on social media, what are the top 3 struggles of pastoring a church with your wife? Be real honest.
Yeah. There's the tension of doing what's right by you and doing what's right by the church. Like when we have staff meetings and you and I don't see eye to eye, the beauty in that is that we love him more than we love each other.
Yeah.
And so we're willing to like step into that and say, hey, I don't agree with you. Hey, I don't agree with you. And it's not a matter of you and it's not a matter of me. It's just we really want to do right by the church. And so that makes for tense moments with other people because we don't mean anything by it. And everybody else is like, should we leave?
If you're wondering if that means that we've gotten in a fight in a staff meeting, the answer is
heated discussions.
100%. We've had a heated discussion. And the last one we had was probably the most intense, and we got home from the meeting and you and I wildly disagreed on the plan, and you're the pastor and you were holding the vision, and I loved you enough to say like, I don't think that's the way it should go. And we got home and you said, after we got done fighting, you said, I'm so glad we both love God enough to fight this out. To talk this out.
Struggle just to walk the balance of leader, pastor, but also being a husband is hard. I think too, just because our church is in the season that we're in, it makes things, it's more of a like, let's all show up and do what we need to do, and less of like, okay, you do this, I do that. And so I think it is hard to figure out black and white, how do we use you and steward your gifts well? And then he said 3. And so I'll try to think of one more. I feel like this one's out of our control, but I think the tension of knowing how to step into relational conflict
with other people
when I want to protect is the wrong word, but when I want to like step in a way to honor you and serve you, but then also needing to pastor the church, but then also wanting you to be able to handle any tension that you might need to handle.
Sure.
And not like run in and try to save the day, but also just like...
Well, we handle conflict in really different ways.
Different ways. Yeah. And so that is always a dance. And so I would say those are the 3 things.
Okay, good. Okay, that's going to be it for this section. Join us in the 3rd and final installment of this Go and Tell Gals with Pastor Nick, where we're going to ask a bunch of random questions that are not related to any capacity, but they're things that people wanted to hear from you.
Let's do it.
Hey friends, in this break, I want to make sure that you have heard about Go and Tell Gals and our Go teams. Here's what they are. Go teams are our online coaching groups that go for about 3 months that provide women who want to step into their call with encouragement and equipping and resources and community. So you get 9 coaching sessions over the period of 3 months, and you get to walk with a group of women who are called to the similar things that you're called to. The Go and Tell Gals team spends all our time really just pouring out whatever resources we can gather and making sure you feel spurred on in whatever God's calling you to. We have Go teams for women in ministry. We have Go teams for women who are called to start small businesses, and we have Go teams for women who are interested in publishing. And our spring 2019 Go teams begin in January. So if you would like a spot, you need to run now and sign up. Go to goandtellgals.com and make sure you click on Go Teams to get more information. We would love to have you. All right, friends, third and final session of the Go and Tell Gals podcast with Pastor Nick. I have already warned him, this is not the only time he's going to join us. Really, I'm trying to talk him into starting a podcast with me, so I would like you to go to N Connolly on Instagram. It's the @ N Connolly, and just harass him. Just tell him over and over again that you want him to start a podcast with me, and maybe tell him names. Okay, Spitfire, these are all random. Yep. So if you're a woman, if you're a man, these are going to jump all around all different topics. How do you spend time with God, Nick Connolly?
Wow. Okay. So I think it's a little more free flowing. Sometimes it's getting up before our kids get up, and sometimes it's in my exercise workout. Sometimes it's the quiet drive home. I think the important thing is, especially when you have a lot of things going on, is to capture the moments where you don't have anything going on and just seize those moments, because I think our natural tendency is like, okay, let me turn on something, let me call somebody, let me watch this, let me do that. And the reality is it's an amazing moment just to pause. Logistically, I usually am reading somewhere in his word, and then I'm kind of journaling some thoughts and just trying to capture one thing. And then hopefully at some point in the day, I'm reading something that challenges me. Right now, I'm reading Letters to the Church, and oh my, it's doing some good things. And I'm also reading your Nameless book, but I cannot say the name, but I'm reading that as well.
Which means a lot to me.
The paper copy.
Yeah, you have the printed out paper copy. Okay, this is a question I think I know the answer to, but I'd like to hear your answer to it. Are there things you decided you would not talk about on social media that we decided as a couple that we would not share on social media?
I think the bigger thing is not a list of what we won't talk about, but is the list of what we will talk about. And I the more and more I preach and the more and more I teach, I just only want to talk about Jesus. I only want to talk about the work that he's done. I only want to talk about the power that's made available through the resurrection. I only want to talk about the love of the Father towards us. And so I literally don't have a list of things that I want to not talk about, if that makes sense. I really just have one list and one thing that I really want to talk about, and that's God's love and work and power and life that he has for us.
That's good. As far as things being off limits, what you may not know if you follow me on social media is that Nick reads a lot of my posts before I post them. I ask you to read a lot of them before I post them.
Yeah, and sometimes I'm like, why didn't you ask me to read that?
You always say that. He's always like, you're fine. Post what you want. And I'm like, I just want to check. I just want to, especially if it's about you and especially if it's about our church. I would say we don't tell our kids stories for the most part. If we do, we kind of check with them.
Yeah.
That's their story to tell. I think what's really important about what you'll talk about and what you won't talk about is the timing. So I will talk about rough times in our life, and I will even talk about rough parts of our marriage, but it's the timing.
Yeah.
I'm sure enough not going to post real time, in a fight, this stinks, he's the worst.
XO.
And so I would say we wait for healing to come before we share stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, there's that. What advice would you give to a couple that's not in vocational ministry, but really wants to run on mission together?
Okay. I would say, I know that you know this, and so I'm not saying this to correct anyone, but number one, you are in ministry, whether that's, the word vocation is just such a weird thing. We are all being paid by God. One of the biggest lessons I learned during the recession is it doesn't matter where I work or who I work for. God is always the one cutting my check, and I'm always working for him. So whether that's in the office or on a construction site or whatever, I'm always working for him. And so I think number one, just seeing yourself, when you wake up in the morning, you are on mission to represent him and shine brightly for the people around you. And then the other thing I would always say is I would say you need to care more about the person than the outcome of that person's life. And what I mean by that is I think we need to be people who would simply love people, even if that means them not crossing the line of faith, and even if that means them not coming to our church. And I think a lot of times we, especially in the church and especially in the South, every relationship seems like some sort of Ponzi scheme to get them into your church and to get the attendance up and to get the numbers padded. And I think at the end of the day, people are people, and we're called to simply love people where they are for as long as they're in that season. And it is not meant for conversion into our system and our structure, but it is meant to just simply love people, even if they don't cross the line of faith, and even if it doesn't mean them coming to our church. I think a lot of times I'll ask our people is, are you willing to love people even if that means them going to another church? And I just don't think that we have that mentality sometimes.
That's good. By the nature of marriage and being in ministry together, but even if you're not ministry together, this is just marriage. We have to critique each other a little bit sometimes. Okay. We have to critique is just the wrong word.
Yeah.
We have to call each other up. We have to even I would encourage one another. What does that look like? What has been okay about it? How have I done it wrong? How does it work for you? I will say this answers two questions with one. I'll start. Everybody was asking what Enneagram number Nick is. He's a number 1 on the Enneagram. I'm an 8 on the Enneagram. Check out the Enneagram Institute if you have no idea what we're talking about. So what is interesting to me that I'll just tell people, because you won't tell people this, is that Enneagram 1s are typically full of critique. They are very concerned with right and wrong, and you do not critique me at all. He's a 1 wing 2, which means 2 is the helper. And so I even told you a few weeks ago, I said, it's really interesting that your 2 comes out so strong with me and not your 1. You critique me in silly ways, how to load the grocery cart, but even you've gotten better at that.
I think it's more of the Tetris game that I love playing in the grocery cart.
How Nick's Enneagram 1 comes out is that when we go grocery shopping, what he used
I want
to do.
to teach you things and teaching.
He wants to teach. So what he used to do is when I would load the grocery cart, he would behind me reload it and make it fit better, which if you are not an Enneagram 8, which I am, and Enneagram 8s do not like to be controlled, it would make me irate. And I'd be like, why are you doing that?
I'm just having fun. I got to be at Trader Joe's and doing something. I'm packing the grocery cart to the glory of God.
But I have done a lot wrong in our life. And you have had to either tell me or somehow subtly let me know, or at least be a mirror to me once I've realized that I'm wrong. And I've had to do the same for you, because at the end of the day, it's just you and me out here. You know what I'm saying? So if I feel if you're making a huge misstep, I've had to tell you what's been good about that, what's been bad about it, what's worked, what hasn't worked.
I think the one thing that I do value is that I do feel like it's not a lot of little things, but it's usually hey, you're about to fall off the cliff. And so I feel like that's helpful. Not that anybody wants to be told that they're about to fall off a cliff, but I feel like everybody should want to be told that you're about to fall off a cliff, or hey, that's not what you want to do. I don't think that's how you want to say it. And so I do feel like it's not a lot of little things that add up. It's usually a big thing. I would say too, just being able to not use the word as a weapon, but just being able to stay grounded in the word. I feel like one of the job descriptions that, just speaking again to husbands, but this is really for all of us, is a husband's job is to wash with the word. And I just feel like we're not out there pressure washing everything in life. We're supposed to gently and delicately wash each other with the word. And so in any relationship that you're in, it's not using it as a weapon. Just be like, hey man, or hey you, hey whoever.
Hey man.
Just say hey man as a hey. I feel like you're missing the heart of God in this moment. And I feel like that's really essentially what it is. It's not about the right theology, and it's not about the right belief, and it's not about the right way of life. It's about missing the heart of God. And I feel like that's what really should be the heart in everything. I think when my 1 tends to come out more in overarching reform of major things.
Yeah.
Is man, I just want to see good done in the world.
Yeah.
And I want to do whatever I can to be a part of that. And so I think that's just a little different bend for me.
And I've learned to take those things with a grain of sand. For one, I notice you say things a lot our house is great, I love our house, but sometimes you'll be like, man, everything's breaking in here. And I'm like, okay, everything's not breaking, but like, I've learned to not freak out.
We're all gonna die.
Yeah, you'll say like, or you'll point out 3 things that are breaking at once. And to me, that used to be really discouraging. And now I'm like, oh, he just notices right and wrong.
Oh
it's
man,
okay.
I see the imperfection, but I'm like, all right, what do we got to do to fix it?
Yeah.
I'm not just walking around going like, oh, that stinks. That's not good. That's horrible. I'm like in everything, even like at our kids' school, I'll see something. I'm like, oh man, that's not right. And I'm like, okay, how do I like quit my job and become a teacher? Like that's just it. It's like a bad, horrible thing, but also like a good thing.
You probably know the passage, Matthew 28. I think it's either 28 or 25 about not putting nooses around each other's necks. And I think there's a lot to say for critiquing without carrying.
Oh yeah.
And when you and I do have to critique each other, it's us saying like, I see this broken thing, or you're about to fall off a cliff, but like I want to jump with you.
Yeah, I'm here with you.
Like I want to. You get to share my parachute. So
Yeah.
if I'm willing to point out something, I'm saying like I'm gonna help, and that helps a ton. I think you and I have found a lot of value in the phrase like you might be right. A lot of times, if I don't think you're
might be right,
if I think you're really wrong, I'll say like you might be right, or I'll say like that's interesting. Okay. Or a lot of times,
which are all phrases like, that I've picked up on. I'm like, oh, good.
Yeah, but at least I'm not saying like you're dead. And same, you do the same to me. Or you'll say like, huh? If I critique you about something and you don't think I'm right, you'll say like, I'll pray about that.
Yeah.
Like, and I know you genuinely will. Like, you'll ask God, like, do I need to see that? So I don't subscribe to a marriage where like we don't get to say like, ouch, that hurts.
Yeah.
Or like, don't do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think you hit the nail on the head with the caring and offering critique, but also like carrying that with someone. I feel like one of the things that social media has done to our culture is it just allows us to like come on a mass media platform and just critique left and right. And sometimes people use the word like, oh man, I'm just defending truth, or I'm just defending this, or like trying to hold people to God's standard. But the word was written for people to be rooted in community.
Right.
And so when Paul is correcting or gently reminding people who they are, it's always with the intent of like, hey, I am in this with you. I am serving this in this church with you. I am a part of this church with you. I am a part of this community with you. We are all in this together. So when I see that this is going awry in you, or when I see that you're struggling in this, it is me pointing it out, but it's also me being the person that's going to help you carry that. And I just feel like we miss that sometimes. There is such an amazing, beautiful opportunity for the church to be the people that say, hey, that's not who God's made you to be, and I'm here for the long haul to help you be that.
And worth noting too, you and I do not receive criticism of people who aren't willing to walk with us.
Yeah,
and we just don't receive it. You will not have a meeting with someone if you know they're bringing a critique, but they aren't like
invested
on your team or are going to walk with you. Like if you're on our team, if you love us, if we're friends, if we're family, and that doesn't mean like if you believe blindly in everything that we do.
No, it's me saying I need you to help me get to where God's called me to.
Yeah.
And if you're not willing to help me get there, then you can't just say this and let the door hit you on the way out. You need to help me walk into that. And I just don't think people are willing to do that sometimes.
Yeah, you won't even take that meeting. And same, it's the same reason why an Amazon review is not going to make me lose my mind. Because like the person who tells me, Nick and I actually right now have an internet troll who's been coming first for me and then for you every time I block her.
Oh, yeah.
And I say troll not as a like derogatory, like I think she's probably a human person who needs Jesus, but she keeps critiquing me and keeps critique, but I'm like, we don't carry this, we don't hold this. You actually literally do not know us. But if you know us and you love us and you walk with us, like you get to speak into everything and we'll hear it.
Absolutely.
Okay, last question.
Let's do it.
How do you stay inspired? How do you stay awake?
Whoa.
How do you stay alive in God?
I would say that this season has not been a heavy inspirational, like alive, seeing things in living color. And I think that there's some good in that, and there's also some like hard things in that. And I think there's some good in that because I think there's a lot of amazing things in life that inspire you and point you back to the Lord. And I think sometimes there's just those seasons that you don't need the things of God, you need actual God. And I think this is just one of those seasons where I'm like, man, I think there is beauty all around me, but right now I just need to be at the feet of Jesus. And I think I'm in that season, but I love to travel. Like, I don't get to do it a lot, but I love other countries. I love other nationalities. I love seeing how other people do church. Outside of the U.S., I love seeing how other places in the world are gathering around the name of Jesus. I love big cities. We live in Charleston, and Charleston's kind of like a got you fooled big city. Like, it's very tiny, but it feels a little bit of an urban kind of vibe. But I love being around big cities. I love listening and taking in when people are really good at something. So whether that's good music or good food, or people are just really good at what they do. Like, I just love being in awe of that. I just think it's an amazing thing. And so I think those are all things that I love. And then also I would just say I love being alone. Like, not like leave me alone every day.
Yeah.
But there is just something beautiful about being able to like get away and just like hear what God has to say. And it has been a season where I don't feel like he is like audibly said a lot of things to me, or there's been like a ton of inspiration, but I still just love that practice. Like, I love just getting away, because I think we're all one moment away from a burning bush.
Right.
And I just want to keep pressing in, because you never know when that bush is coming. And I just want to be there when it starts to burn.
Come on. I think the biggest thing I'm taking away is like, you got to know how you hear from God. You got to know what's inspiring to you, and you got to do it. And I do know that you are very good about making those practices happen, and I'm thankful.
Thank you.
Okay, friends, this is not the last time you'll be hearing from Nick Connolly. As always, will you do me a favor? Will you stop right now and will you pray for my husband? Will you thank God for him, and will you ask God for vision? My favorite prayer to pray for Nick is give him favor, give him fervor, and guide his steps. You can join me in praying that for him today. Give him favor, give him fervor, and guide his steps. And also, go harass him on Instagram and tell him to start another podcast with me. Okay?
Let's do it. Can I say something?
Yes, we'll let you update.
I have no idea who all of you are, but I just know that like God has a place for you in his kingdom, and he has a place for you in his church. And I know, especially at this day and age in our time and culture, everything around you could point to chaos and could point to conflict and could point to you wanting to give up. But just keep going. Don't quit. Keep doing the thing that God's called you to. It might not be ministry. It might be a relationship. It might be a marriage. It might be a discouragement with your family. It might be a discouragement with your calling. It might be a discouragement with where you are in life. No matter what it is or where you are in life, just keep going. And I know that if you do not give up, you will see the harvest. That's right. Not my words. That's Galatians 6:9. So
that's right.
Take it to the bank.
Thank you, guys. Love you so much. Hey, thanks so much for joining me, you guys, on this special podcast episode with my husband, Nick Connolly. You can follow him at @Connolly on Instagram. That will make him wildly uncomfortable, but you know what? He has so many wise things to say, and I would love if you would follow him. You can follow our church at Bright City Church on Instagram, and he's always sharing content and information over there. Pray for him, pray for our church, pray for his leadership and his vision, that God would continue to give him favor, give him fervor, and guide his steps. And harass him and tell him you want more episodes with Nick Connolly, because I sure do. It was so fun to sit with him for an hour and talk and chat. We pray you are having an incredible holiday season. We are so thankful for this podcast. We are so thankful for Go and Tell Gals and all that God is doing in and through y'all, and this time and this season of the kingdom, and women really taking their place and getting excited about what God is doing in their lives. We are so thankful to serve you and to be on your team.